Dear audience, welcome to yet another iteration of the Nordic Cultural Point series of discussions on art in a digital era. Tonight we are talking about artists online. That's the topic given. Guests are Juha van Ingen from Finland and Jonas Lund, a Swedish artist. And both of them have a history of working with digital formats in various ways. I will just start. I will also tell you about how this is going to proceed. Initially, the artists are going to present themselves, which makes my job far easier. And then some 10 minutes each. And then afterwards, we have a discussion relating to the topic of tonight, the artist online, and what the consequences this has onto their own practices. But I would like to start asking Juha and Jonas, are you an artist online? Starting with Juha.
Well, I got art online, but I don't have a very active artist presence online, so I'm not fully on Twitter and all these things. But otherwise, like I use the internet in my works, and I've got browser-based works and things like that. So basically, that's my answer.
Okay, and how about you, Jonas? Are you an artist online?
I mean, I'm not sure I'm an artist to begin with, but then online. So it's funny because last year there was a group show at König Gallery in Berlin called "The Artist is Online," and I was part of that show. So I suppose I spend a lot of time online, and a lot of my work is only accessible online, similar to Juha. Like you make online works, engaging with all the different technologies that emerges and comes with its own problems or not. But if I'm online, I mean, sometimes, but I also make like offline art. So I would say I would put the number to 55.5% online.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so you have both prepared presentations of your work. So why don't we start with Juha and then continue directly with Jonas?
Okay, fine. So basically, I'm a visual artist, and I started my artist practice in the end of 80s. I used video and such, and my first contact with internet was in 95. Together with a colleague, we made a quite an innovative art project called Re-Evolution, and the idea was that we invited artists, put works online, and the audience could manipulate that and send them back again. And actually, I found the original sticker from 95. I don't know if you can see something. That's about what's left of that project. But since that, I've been aware of internet, and of course, it's had a lot of influence in my own work. I've mainly used the browser itself, and that's been like the tool in some of my web works. But also, the internet has been helping me disseminate my works, and I mean, it's not so easy to find an audience here in Finland, and through internet I've found people from elsewhere. But I'm not actually a computer artist or an internet artist. I'm a visual artist, and I don't come from a computer background. So every time a new gadget comes out, it's an experience, and I try to play with it and see maybe if it's useful for my art. But one of my most like important internet artworks is Websafe, which I made in 99, 2000. and that was a piece where I was exploring the situation of internet at that time and different kind of things related to that. And but the work has been back to business several times since then, and I've been trying to kind of reframe it into different situations, taking it offline, making it into prints and such, and then eventually last year I was invited to an exhibition with Jonas actually, where the work was shown in its original format, which was very nice. But anyway, I do other things besides internet art. I make installations and video works and animations. But actually, internet has been the source of inspiration to one of my major works. Actually, the major work which I've done called As Long as Possible. Because in 2015, I was participating in a project which was happening in Hong Kong. And a part of the project was that there was an online presence with the theme ocean. And artists were invited to make a GIF animation fitting that theme, but the file size was limited to something like 800 kilobytes or something like that. So it would run smoothly online. And my idea was to create kind of a cycle just happening on the online, creating a GIF animation with just numbers, in a way illustrating the cycle of water. I don't know if it was a good idea or bad idea, but what happened was that during that process, I started thinking about the structure of GIF and also how to make it smaller, of course, because I wanted to make a big cycle. And it brought me to the idea of slowing down the GIF to get more information there. And one thing led to another, and in the end, I thought about what if I could make animation which would really kind of contain time, and that led to making a GIF animation loop, which is 1,000 years long, and it was started in 2015, and it's running in the collections of the Finnish National Gallery at the moment. And on the 28th it's been running for 5 years non-stop, so it's a bit of a celebration time there. But without internet, of course, that work would have not happened. But then again, it's about this time, and it's about modern communication, about file formats and things like that. But I could go on and on about these different single works, but I think it would be more interesting if I just kind of, once we start talking, I can slice in with some detailed information and let Jonas talk about his works.
Sorry, I was just looking. Hi, I'm back. Hey, thank you. I will share my screen, show my website as a thing, because if we're talking about the artist online, we got to talk about the website, right? Or like, if we are indeed online. I take great pride in my website as being like very up to date and the like sort of authoritative truth of everything that I do. So it's that's the thing. So let me just start this one. Okay, let's share. And if you can see it, it's fantastic. If you can't, we have a problem. But I assume we can see it. Okay. Let's start with the bio. I will do 10-minute presentation. Okay. So it says here that I create painting, sculpture, photography, websites, and performances that critically reflect on contemporary network systems and power structures of control. My practice involves creating systems and setting up parameters that oftentimes require engagement from the viewer. This results in performative artworks where tasks are executed according to algorithms or sets of rules. Through his work, Lund investigates the latest issues generated by the increasing digitalization of contemporary society, like authorship, participation, and distribution of agency. At the same time, he questions the mechanisms of the art world, challenges the production process, authoritative power, and art market practices. So this is like the typical art world bio, which you send everywhere when you're part of exhibitions or talks or whatever, and everybody just glances over it and be like, okay, it sounds good. It sounds like it makes sense. And I think in a way, so I think in these 10 minutes, it makes sense for me to unpack this a bit. And then rather than try and explain one-to-one, what online situations and the internet means in my practice, we can think about the underlying things that it produces and then how it manifests in my work somehow. I think, yeah, that makes sense. So this is my website. So here's on my website, there's 224 works. And the oldest work is from 2011. So that's about 10 years, almost 11 years of production, resulting in 224 works. It's a bit, sometimes I wonder how, but it makes sense. Okay, so let's pick a random one. We can, here there's a selection, we can select website. So then we get all the works that deal with some type of website or some type of online presence. And there's a lot of different works. And there's a lot of different works that are physical shows that also deal with websites as entities. So we can look at, let me just find a good example of something that makes sense. Yeah, okay, Studio Practice, which is a piece from 2014, which was an exhibition at a commercial gallery in Amsterdam called Nispen, and it lasted for around 8 weeks. For this project, I transformed the whole gallery into a production facility, like a artist studio. And I hired 6 assistants to work for me full-time throughout the whole exhibition. Their mission was to create process-based abstract expressionist paintings, which were really the hyper trend back in 2014. Inspired by all the flip collector or kind of Oscar Murillos of the world. Everything was managed through the website, studiopractice.biz, where you could see a live stream from the gallery and you get in-depth details and documentation of every work that's been produced. And so essentially how it worked is I made a book of instructions, like an instruction manual, 300 pages. Every assistant got to study this book. When the exhibition started, their mission was to just make artworks, like square, rectangular paintings, basically. As soon as they were happy with what they made, we documented it, uploaded it to the website, and then it was appraised by an advisory board of 14 people, including collectors, curators, artists, and general art world professionals. Right? Based on their appraisal, I would then decide whether the painting should be signed as a work of art by Jonas Lund or if it should be destroyed. They had this type of slider when they were doing the appraisals, like destroy works, sign works, so you get a score. And then here are some examples of the paintings that were made. So in a way, it encapsulated pretty much everything that is described in my bio. That is to say that there is a system, there's a hierarchical system set up of instructions of performances, very similar to how you write computer code. This whole piece is sort of from A to B to C to D to E, like the one next step follows the other. And what it tries to explore, what it's looking into, is not only the network distribution of agency, where you're trying to reach consensus in the value of an artwork by a distributed advisory board, but also how the whole network of the art world / art market operates. And if that can be sort of manipulated and tuned based on precise instructions. So in this way, we can have a look at the website and see some and everything is entirely transparent, and it's kind of like this. So the website is still up, and here you can see all the different works in a sort of endless list. And the red in the background indicates that it was not approved. So one can go back here way. Yeah, it's a lot of work. So you click on a work. This is a process this to vinyl paint and acrylic on canvas. And here are some of the appraisals. So essentially like that, like thinking then about working online, what it means to work online, or what consequences it has, or what it enables you to do. It's like this is as a pretty appropriate example of something where the show is physical, the works are physical, but the concept and the value production and the meaning is all online. It's all like distributed through the networks. Essentially, it's a sort of manifestation of like a super, like I had to say it like this: the inspiration for the studio setup was a mix of Olafur Eliasson and Jeff Koons, because they have some huge operations in terms of their studio output, and I wanted to sort of mimic or explore similar strategy. So that's a very typical work from me, let's say. And then what that means, and then one can continue and think about all the different things in kind of different layers of that. Maybe that's enough actually, because I can go on forever essentially, because now we caught up with one work out of 224, but I'm not sure. Maybe I can, just because it makes sense, maybe I can do like this. So the show that Juha mentioned that happened last year, he didn't mention where it was, but it was in Centre Pompidou in Paris, which is like one of the most important institutions in Europe for sure. And during last year, they staged, I think it was the only online show they staged, and it's one of the first online shows they've staged. And that was very interesting, like a nice sort of moment to have that as a place. The work I showed there was this piece from 2012, which is now 10 years old, which is called "What You See Is What You Get," which basically is super early exploration of formalistic browser-based works, which says that every visitor to this website's browser size collected and played back sequentially, ending with your own. So if we look at it, we can see what happens. It's just like every time you visit it, it records your browser window size, and then it just plays them back in sequence from the first visitor to the last visitor. And it's then like exploring or thinking about, I'm gonna have to close it soon, otherwise my browser will crash. Then like trying to exploring like different layers of privacy, or how you be tracked online, because your browser window size is part of a classic fingerprinting technique to follow you around on the internet, basically. A very simple piece, but nevertheless like pretty like on point when it comes to a long history of browser-based formalistic explorations. And I think between those two, I would say that's probably a good place to stop for now. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
Jonas and Juha. I mean, you come from quite different backgrounds. Juha never passed the art academy, so in that sense, he's a joyful, self-taught artist in some senses. And while you, Jonas, you come from a background of well, photography and programming, right?
Yeah.
And then art school.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and more or less, I think it's much simpler than what it sounds. So I did my bachelor in photography at the Rietveld in Amsterdam, the Rietveld Academy. And then throughout the studies, I started to learn how to program, make websites or whatever. And then after that, I finished the photography. And then after finishing my bachelor, I never basically did anything with photography ever again, because of the education. So then I also, in a way, it was, like on the one hand, you have a medium that is very slow, very tedious, and very kind of like and in particular, how it was taught at the Rietveld. It's like you make something, you spend a lot of time making a physical object, a sculpture, whatever, point your camera at it, press the button, and then what you capture is the work. And it felt like, I mean, this is like I finished 2009, right? And so that's really like in the wave of when social media networks are properly starting to emerge, and there's a massive movement from Web 1.0, which was like the first .com boom, to the Web 2.0, where you feel like as a programmer, you make online work, you can. It's very much like the Jamaican music industry back in the 60s. You record the song in the morning and you release it in the club in the evening, and then that's it. So the speed in which you can make work was incredibly attractive to me in terms of making online stuff, in particular in comparison with photography. So then, I mean, I would like to say now that there was an immediate switch, but of course it took me a while to discover this, like that whole network of net art, that's been alive and ongoing since the early 90s. At the latest. So, but that was a pretty obvious transition for me, because it felt not only it's much more exciting for me in terms of the production mechanisms, it's also much more relevant in terms of how our culture is changing and updating. So I think that was somehow a very long answer to a very short question.
Yes, because I want to take the question from that and also involve Juha in a short moment. Because there is a history of artists avoiding, artists being artists, but somehow avoiding making art, or at least making the final artistic decisions about what the artwork should look like. I mean, you have it in the Fluxus movement, you have it in artists like Tingeli, who makes these sort of machines creating artworks. You have it in conceptual art, also artists working with methods where they actually can't really influence the final outcome of the artwork. And in that sense, I feel that it's not only being part of something new, which is sort of digital art or being an artist online, but it's also part of being part of this longer line of artists trying to find a way of not doing that final decision, allowing it to be a randomized process or process influenced by others. Am I totally wrong, Jonas?
I think you are totally accurate in this description of which probably reveals more about my own insecurities and hesitancies rather than any kind of direct motivated strategy. I think in a way, for me, I'm very interested in like as a sort of core through line, red line in my work for the last 10 years. It's like I'm very interested in this subjective / objective value production in the art world, where seemingly artwork's value is subjective, right? It's up to each individual to determine what the work is valued to you, right? But there's also like an objective value in the art world of like a hierarchical networked value, where certain artists gets platformed or promoted and promoted, and it's not necessarily always in relation to what work they're making. There's something else there, right? So in a way, for me, I've been trying or I've explored, let's say, in many different works, different mechanisms for how to manipulate or use this type of subjective / objective value production in the making of the work, with the theory, or like in relation to the theory of the institutional theory of art, that art is whatever the art world says is art. So then by extension, the art world determines what is relevant, good quality art or not. So if I can hedge it and stake my production, that I have the art world as part of my concept or project, and they determine it to be valuable, it is the truth. Right? It doesn't matter. It no longer matters of the subjective opinion, but I have staked the network to prove my artwork. It's a bit like a hack, let's say, or like an attempt to hack or subvert the value production. Right? So in that way, I often take a step back from determining the final visual of the work or the final presentation of the work, where it can be in flux, like in relation to fluxes, or it can be sort of based on decisions not entirely up to me. It's a bit of I think that primarily comes from my own personal struggle of taking like the artist's stand, right? To say like, it's like this. But yeah, It's no answer, just more problems, basically. Yeah.
And how about you, Juha? Are you just avoiding making art in your art?
Well, I try to stay interested, and I think that's quite a lot what it's about for me. So I'm basically, I find a bone in the dirt and I lift it up and I think, what can I do with this? And I, uh, I I don't have a kind of a framework where to fit my art. As you know, I work with very different disciplines, and I really love to let the process interfere and actually dictate to me what's going to happen. But of course, um, I like the ideas they had in Fluxus and Dadaism and stuff like that, where you could do anything and then just see what happens as well. Though a lot of my works, like this long loop, is very rigid, but then again, how it became was very kind of just coincidental.
But I mean, also in a work like Websafe, which consists of sort of screen colors being sort of delivered one by one, and even more. I mean, it's a long and complicated process, so there's sort of lots of different sort of imageries coming up. But it's also a project where you are not making the decisions about how the work is supposed to look like. It's actually something happening in the computer, right?
Yes, and also Websafe, when it was made in 99, 2000, it was an interesting time because that was a time when people were starting to think about content rating and censoring the internet. And there were already kind of this kind of content rating associations determining what kind of things you can look at, what kind of information you can disseminate, which is of course still going on. And also there was this concept of web-safe colors, and which meaning colors which would reproduce in most computers in the same way. And that's actually the name of the piece is Websafe. And in a way, all of these things were quite kind of, people were talking about them all the time. Nobody knew what they were about. And then again, everything, you send some information and it happens in your browser when you get it back home. And of course, whatever you see, it's up to you. I mean, people see colors in a different way. And a certain kind of order, hexadecimal order, doesn't make sense to most people, and so on and so on. So it is also about the experience.
It seems to me that you are in some way also a bit of a minimalist in regards of technology, because you have through your career worked with quite simple means, even arcane technologies when it comes to digital art. For example, you're working with these GIF files and such that are sort of very, very simple, and you have also a history of working with text TV art.
Yeah, well, I kind of I start getting fascinated in gadgets once they are in the sales department of the supermarket, and actually I'm quite fascinated with this lo-fi approach because it also kind of liberates you from the budget. I mean, you can just kind of work on things on your own. You don't have to have a big crew. And for me, that kind of personal personal working is quite important. I get to spend as much time on a certain kind of subject matter or theme or whatsoever by just using the kind of technology which I can manage myself on most cases.
To me, it seems like Jonas, you are almost on the other end of the technical gadget department in the hardware store or the software store, because you work to various degrees with sophisticated programming, interactive, various sort of gadgets in the exhibition spaces and such. What is it that actually? I mean, are you a tech freak? Is that sort of an impulse drives you also to include all sorts of technologies, or is there a higher purpose in your art?
I mean, I would definitely not describe me as a tech freak. I think for me, like the reason to involve particular technologies in artistic production is clearly like for me how it works, right? So I usually say like the reason for making work is not necessarily to provide solutions, but to make more problems, right? And like this is the super privilege of being an artist, that you don't have to solve anything. You can just point towards complications, problems in society and be like, hey. So like one of the key ways is to, let's say, make visible certain things. And then when we have like a technocratic elite, largely in Silicon Valley, like in the west coast of the US, driving like the changes in society for largely worse, right? Sometimes better, but let's say not without its problems. The reason to involve particular technologies in shows is to make visible the consequences of such technology, of seeing what it means when a typically formerly manual process of decision making gets outsourced to an automated process or an algorithm or something else, right? Like what happens, and usually like what are the consequences of such decision. So then like I would definitely refute the idea that it's about some techno let's say, how would you say it, like techno fetish. It's not about this. It's rather the opposite of being like very critical of the empty promises from Silicon Valley that technology will fix everything, because I certainly do not believe this. I think it's rather the opposite. Technology would just make everything worse. So it's the classic prophet versus wizard dichotomy, right? It's like one believes that technology will fix everything, the other believes that technology will be the end of the world. Probably it's somewhere in the middle, and it's not so black and white. It's, as I also learned in my life, that almost nothing is binary. Like there's always a tremendous amount of nuance in everything. And you can claim that, sorry, that like technology doesn't really have a bias, that it's like can be used for both good and bad. And I think that's true for most technologies. I would certainly say that most of the like billionaire elite, like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, etc., certainly have a bias in how they use technology. I think Amazon is like one of the worst companies in the world in how they manage people, like through automated processes. Like it's, I don't know if it's known, but it just needs to be said that Amazon every 3 months cuts 6% of its bottom performance employees. So it's an automated process that does performance reviews. Everybody who's in the bottom 6% gets automatically fired across the whole company, from developers to people working in the warehouse to people working in management. I mean, it's incredibly dystopian, like such a system. So then clearly to involve technology in the shows is to address all the consequences of, for example, something like this, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. So you also have also stepped into the world of digital manipulation yourself. For instance, you had this project about reversing the Brexit. How did that work out?
Unfortunately, it didn't work, right? Because Brexit happened. But again, like, I mean, it's a good example of some of the things I mentioned. So the idea with this, it was called Operation Earnest Voice Brexit Division. Took place at the Photographers Gallery in London in 2019, just like the week before Theresa May's Brexit deal vote was going to go through in Parliament. The point of the show was to set up an influencing agency like Cambridge Analytica Satire to use all the different tools and techniques that Cambridge Analytica used in the Brexit referendum, in the Brexit vote no, vote yes, vote for Brexit campaign. It was called Vote Leave. Yeah. So to use this and make visible all these different structures, right, to get to really like make it tangible how you can sway and influence people online. It's like the classic manufacturing consent. So in that sense, how it worked, like it worked out as a piece. Did it work out with its mission of reversing Brexit? No. It's a very long story, but I could say in short terms, it was complicated. Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting project also because it's actually addresses a lot of these things that are happening right now in this very moment in regards of world conflicts and so forth. We are under various forms of pressure from all sides to come to conclusions about the world situation. And how about you, Juha? You have a different relationship to your audience. I would say that you, while Jonas is actually talking to very much to an audience present right now, you are addressing a future audience, not only an audience living now or tomorrow, but also an audience living in 1,000 years. Because your work, this as long as possible, is a sort of a slide projection or displaying numbers being projected over time into I mean, I don't know how many frames, but it's a lot of frames being ticked through a machinery which will go on until 1,000 years. And this work, you have actually protected it in a way that it's supposed to be possible to perceive it in 1,000 years and even further than that. Please tell more about that project.
Yeah, well, I mentioned briefly that when I was trying to introduce myself as an online artist. Well, basically, it's one single GIF animation file, which it's got about 48 million frames, and each frame has a number just showing its place in the animation. So starting from 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. And when it reaches the last frame, it will automatically start from the beginning because it's a loop. And of course, there were a lot of challenges technically making this, and I must admit that here I had to use some really clever people, Janne Särkelä and Jonas Lindqvist, to help me to make it happen. But basically, it's a very simple work. And when GIF animations were made in '87, I think, when they were made first, the instructions to the design team was that make them really simple. And if something was simple in the '80s, it sure is very simple nowadays, computer-wise. So I got this idea that, I've got this really simple file, and which is created in our times, and it's a digital file because we are living in the digital times now. And whenever I approach some institution or a place to trying to kind of step into the project and take one of these units to run it, people thought, well, it's impossible, it's too difficult. And it in a way, it was what this work is about, because if it seems to be difficult to run one GIF animation, what happens to all the other information we've got? All our pictures, all the data, all the programs, all the computers, everything else. So in a way, this is kind of, the idea of this work is that it's kind of a little candle of our time, and the longer it shines, the more valuable it becomes. It's kind of a reminder of our times. And of course, we've only done 5 years, and there's still 995 years to go for the first loop. So we're basically in the beginning, but it's, like I said, it's been a big challenge, and it's also quite mind-blowing that, because it's not a generative artwork, it's already there. So basically, it's like a book where you kind of just flip the pages. And like what happens in, during all these times, and already in 5 years, so many different things have happened, which we have not even dreamt of, like the recent events in Ukraine and all that stuff. So will it ever see the end of the first loop? Well, that's a big question. But anyway, the idea is that it's also somehow communicating about the thing about museums and stuff like that, because the idea is that there are several loops which are situated in different museums, and a part of them, there are time capsules which contain all the information required to reconstruct the animation. So if there's a big disaster like a war or a flood or a strike, the work can be reconstructed and started, made to run the original pace to document the original loop. But of course, museums haven't been that long around either. I don't know, Pontus, you perhaps know better, but they are quite a recent invention, aren't they, historically speaking?
Yes, yeah, sure. Sure, they are. I mean, in the museum, in our sense, it's basically a 19th century invention. But that's, of course, it has a prehistory. But anyhow, in a way, I sense a sort of a pessimism in your work, in the sense that it's not only your work, but there is a number of projects these days that are directed for a very distant future, and sometimes also future-proofed, so they could work even without us being present as humans, as we stand here now, our culture or our cultures. So are we living in a pessimistic time, and is your artwork a result of standing at the edge of history?
Well, I don't think so, because when you look at contemporary art, it can be a banana taped on the wall or just kind of anything. So in that sense, even my animation is kind of there. It's just an image of this time. And for example, in Finnish, they say that when somebody paints a portrait, that henkilö ikuistetaan. That means that somebody is made immortal by painting. And anyway, this kind of thinking has a little bit disappeared from art, slightly, I don't know. But I don't think my work in sense is pessimistic, because I believe that, in 2017, somebody will just light a candle, 1,000 candles on a cake, and people will clap with their hands, or somebody, and the loop will go on.
Okay, and how about you, Jonas? How are we entering a new era in art? Is it digital art that is sort of a future, or is this? Because we speak about the digitalization of art, but does it mean that there is a general movement into digitalization of art, I mean, in my experience, I've never seen so much bad painting as these days. But you might have a different vision.
Yeah.
Is art?
Yeah, it depends. I don't know. Like I just have this. There's this like crass joke about like in relation to the future of things, and then it's to say that the art critic is the last job in a civilized society. Right? Like the art critic is like the most surplus, superfluous job there is. So in a way, maybe that's it. I don't know. It's not. I don't. It's not a joke for me. I think it's actually a comment by Jerry Saltz, which makes sense. But I think in terms of addressing the question of digitalization, like that's been going on for a while already. It also depends on what one means with digitalization. If that means digital processes in the production of work, because then it's 100% digital already, right? Because there is no painter or classically trained sculptor who doesn't spend half his day on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever. So it's like we become completely consumed by like networks, right? So that's one aspect to think about the digitalization. The other is to say that, okay, so digitalization would mean that the majority of works would somehow be digital and not physical, like as a separation, whereas the physical work might still be digital because it might have digital production mechanisms, right? So, and then in that sense, I don't think so anytime soon. Like I think there might be many bad paintings, but the demand for paintings by an art market is definitely not shrinking. Although maybe now when like most Russian billionaires can no longer buy artworks at Sotheby's and Christie's, so might see a contraction of the art market for a while. I don't know, to be honest. There's also, of course, then the latest trend of NFTs, which is another topic in itself. I would say it's certainly not going backwards, right? So like the digital processes that govern pretty much all parts of our life at this point will certainly influence more and more and more artistic production. And as I was saying earlier, like which I totally believe too, is like, so you can see the contemporary art as a reflection of its own culture. The more digital, the more networked our culture becomes, the more networked and digital the works become. It's like the one follows the other very logically, because it's also what is the most pressing topics for each individual. Right? So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the NFTs, and that was the topic for the last iteration of this series. But I would still, I mean, I noticed that both of you have been involved somehow in NFT launches or related projects. You were recent, but both of them are sort of anti-art market, or sort of trying at least to slip out of that sort of frame of capitalization of the token itself, but also of this sort of massive speculation that has been surrounding at least the reputation of the NFT. How about you, Juha? You were recently in an artist-run NFT project, right?
Yes, but for me it was quite interesting experience, as somehow I see there are a lot of possibilities in this NFT business for like artist-run spaces and similar structures to get some sort of income or followers, or just to store, for example, their archives and stuff. But I mean, this was my first brush stroke on this field, so let's see how things develop in the future. But
okay, but thinking, that was yeah.
Yeah.
Go on. Just go on.
Up to you.
Okay. No, I had nothing. But that was a non-commercial project, right? Or at least it tried to avoid these sort of traps of speculation, wasn't it? It's sort of a collective endeavor.
Yes, it was a kind of a collaborative project. It's still going on, by the way. So if somebody wants to buy the NFTs, there are still a few for sale. So basically, the idea was that they were really cheap, so anyone could get one if they wanted. And also, the results of the collaboration are equally distributed. So there are some artists who are more kind of suave in NFTs, and of course their works sold immediately, and some are a bit slower. But to me, it was quite interesting to see how this kind of structures could be used in like artist-run organizations. And for example, a small exhibition somewhere in the back room of a warehouse. Well, you could make, for example, a set of NFTs from the tickets, and suddenly people get interested, and so on and so on. But I think Jonas got much more to say about this.
Yes, because you have involved yourself in your own, not NFT, but a JLT. What's that?
The Jonas Lund token, yeah, the JLT. JLT is like, man, this is the problem in my practice of making conceptual works, because the explanations always get so long. But then the shortest version is that the Jonas Lund token is a way for me to get advised through a structured, incentivized system. I made like voting shares in my artistic practice, represented by the Jonas Lund token cryptocurrency. If you have one of them, you get one vote. I submit proposals to the board, they vote, and then I do it according to what the board says. Like, should I go on a sabbatical? Should I live in Berlin, Amsterdam, London, or Sweden? Should I do this? Should I participate in this show, etc.? The point is like similar to how studio practice works. It's sort of a hedged system, right? Because right now there's maybe 170 board members. Most of them art professionals, as in curators, collectors, museum directors, and artists. So kind of a cross section of the art world. What they say, what they determine to be the most strategic decision is by default the most strategic decision, because they are representing the value producing entity of the art world, right? That's somehow the thing. And then the incentivization for reaching strategic decisions means that the better my career performs, the more valuable the token becomes. So then at some point they will be able to sell them later. It's kind of a precursor. It was launched in 2018, so it's a precursor to the whole NFT hype, let's say. And how it relates, I mean, yeah, so NFTs, I would say, as also what I said before, as with most things, is both good and bad. It has good sides and bad sides. It's, of course, fantastic projects in the NFT space. There's, of course, fantastic scams in the NFT space. There's, for sure, lots of legit, serious collectors in the NFT space. And there's pure speculation as well. So you have like everything. It's kind of like maybe a pyramid scheme, but also at the same time not. So it's all very, very nuanced and a kind of gray zone where you want to put your foot down, I would say. In general, I've done a couple of different projects with NFTs, like what it allows you in terms of like, let's say, a distributed economy of support. It's super interesting. I mean, like when I started making net art, there's no way you can make any money making online art, right? Like, how would you ever sell a website? The only person I know, besides like a handful of people that sold many websites, did so like, it's like one or two people from the whole net art network, right? So it's like super. What the NFT enables here is that finally, like these typically like fringed artists can like make some profit, right? Or like find support for their work, which is not a bad thing in itself. You know? It enables, I've heard some very like warming stories of people being able to pay rent because of NFTs and stuff, which of course is, man, it's complicated. Yeah, it's true. So,
but
yeah.
You mentioned, you mentioned somewhere that to be able to criticize the art market, you actually need to be on the art market, and so are you. Are you actually making a lot of money? I'm curious.
To a question to me,
Yes.
I would say on this question, I would say pass, but probably
Okay.
not. I would say
Okay.
in relation to being part of the art market, to critique the art market, I don't think that's true necessarily. I think like Hans Hacke, for example, like one of the most classic institutional critics ever in our history, is like famously keeps a teaching job to keep autonomy from an art market, right? Because like then otherwise you're gonna bite the hand that feeds you, and then what kind of complications does that produce, etc. So I think you can know your enemy without dealing with your enemy. I would think you get different first-hand experiences from being inside an art market of like all the negativity that it can produce and all the different layers of things, I think. So I'm not sure.
Okay, so finally, because we are reaching our time limit and maybe we even passed it, I have one more question. Does the digitalization actually make a shift of power in art possible? Does it move power from the galleries to other agents, for instance, the artists? What do you say, Jonas?
I don't think so, no. I think there's a lot of promise of like the typical punchline with NFTs was to cut out the middleman. So you cut out the gallery or you cut out the institution and you can deal directly to the collector. So then you don't need the middleman. But it's obviously not true because the platforms in the NFT space are the middleman. And then that will normalize completely where every blue chip gallery will have their own NFT platform space in the end anyways. I think nothing can compete with the powerhouse structure of the art world as it is at the moment. Like, I don't think it's going to change. I think it's going to stay what it is. It's like the top institutions and the top galleries will continue to drive the primary discourse in the art world for a long time to come.
Okay, and how about you, Juha? How do you look at this relationship between the artist online, digital art, and the art market?
Well, I don't know much about art market, but I think it's a bit like Jonas said, that the structures are all there, and if something interesting happens, they are the first ones to take the cream on top. But of course, if you're not talking about the market, but some other aspects of being an artist and having the possibility to be online, I think it's a good way of reaching the audience. I mean, that's what you can do. I mean, if you are somewhere here, like where I'm at the moment, and have an exhibition, well, 12 people will come, and there must probably be your friends and relatives. But then again, somewhere else in the world, there can be other people who are doing similar things or who are interested in similar things. And for this purpose, of course, this online stuff is quite good. But like I said, I don't know about this money side, and I trust the honest on this.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think that's enough because we were supposed to speak for 50 minutes and we are getting close to an hour. I would thank you both for all your wisdom and all your experience, and apologize for my own silly questions, and then also tell the audience that you have the possibility to join another discussion in a short while, which will be announced by the Nordic Cultural Point. I'm very grateful for you participating in this, and I say thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.